What would you buy if you had $100 million? Palazzo in Venice, maybe, or perhaps a fleet of private jets or a personal submarine? Or would you plough it all into a single painting? Some of the richest people in the world have done just that.
I think you'll bid at $95 million.
What makes the super rich splash out so much money on art? Is it love, rivalry, or just big business? I want to find out more about this infamously secretive art world and the multi-millionaires who populate it.
You've got your grubby hands on my beautiful wall.
I do apologise.
I'm searching for the most expensive paintings in the world to uncover the stories behind their record-breaking prices.
Fair warning. Going. This is Christie's big showroom in London, and what you can see are the paintings, some of the paintings that will be sold at the big evening auction in New York, which is coming up in just a few weeks. And this is one of the highlights. It's a Picasso. It's a series that he did in the 50s, known as The Women of Algiers, and it's got an upper estimate of $30 million. This is another of the star lots. This is a Monet from a series he did, I think, in the 1890s, 1891. These are poplar trees. This could sell for as much as $30 million. And this is a Rothko that's been practically unknown to art historians, belonged in a private collection. Let's have a look at the estimate. This could sell for $22 million, apparently.
$22 million? $30 million? That sounds like an awful lot of money for a painting. Well, it's not. It's a bargain compared to the eye-watering amounts paid for the top 10 paintings sold at auction.
When you think about it, art is a little bit like magic, because just with the wave of a brush, something that has no practical purpose whatsoever, just a worthless scrap of canvas covered with inexpensive pigment, can become this priceless object that's desired by many of the wealthiest and most powerful people anywhere on the planet. Abracadabra. But how exactly is it done? Just what is the link between art and money?
My story starts here in New York, where the American abstract painter Mark Rothko dominated the art world in the 50s and 60s. And it's perhaps a surprise to those who find abstract art hard to take that one of his paintings is number 10 on my list. To find out why, I've come to a billionaire's skyscraper.
This is Rothko's White Center, and it would cost you more than $72 million. $72,840,000 to be precise. And that put it at number 10 in our list of the most expensive paintings in the world. Going up.
Started bidding at $33, $34, $35 million, and then $36 million a bid.
The painting was sold at the auctioneer's Sotheby's in New York in 2007.
$63 million, fair warning, selling it there, $64 million, just in time.
And when you factor in the hefty buyer's premium on top of the hammer price stated by the auctioneer,
Thank you.
this made it a record-breaking amount, more than 3 times the previous price paid for a Rothko.
So what does this tell us? That White Center is officially the 10th best painting ever made? Not exactly. The important thing to remember is that value isn't only linked to quality.
Something that can send the price of a painting rocketing is what's known in the art world as provenance, who has owned the painting in the past. And in the case of Rothko's White Center, it was owned by one of the wealthiest and most powerful dynasties in America, the Rockefellers, who amassed their fortune from oil and banking and reshaped the New York skyline with the Rockefeller Center. On the 56th floor, David Rockefeller built an impressive art collection that included works by Picasso, Gauguin, and Mark Rothko. In 1960, he paid less than $10,000 for White Center. Half a century later, it was worth more than $72 million.
Today, the painting is even known informally as the Rockefeller Rothko, which says it all. The name of its former owner is as important as that of the artist.
To find out whether White Center deserves its number 10 slot, I'm on my way to New York's famous Pace Gallery to meet one of the world's leading art dealers, Arne Glimcher. Arne was friends with Rothko and has been buying and selling his work for 50 years.
Is this a really great Rothko?
It is a wonderful painting. It is a wonderful painting. What Rothko is really interested in is the idea of an almost formlessness, use of color to transmit pure human emotion. I mean, you just have to strip away all of the prejudices that you have looking at a painting by Rothko and let it flow over you like great music flows over you. You know, there are very few artists in the history of art that create something that we have never seen before. And Rothko is one of those artists. But all kinds of things converge for a painting to bring that sum of money. And
Such as what?
such as its provenance. It was the Rockefeller name, which, you know, amazed me.
Why do you say it amazed you?
Because the whole thing of art and money is ridiculous. The value of a painting at auction is not necessarily the value of a painting. It's the value of two people bidding against each other because they really want the painting.
And the people who bid the most for White Center are rumoured to be oil billionaires, just like the Rockefellers, the Qatari royal family, who will be hosting the Football World Cup in 2022. Sadly, though, White Center hasn't been seen since the auction. I can't even show you a good reproduction. But my next painting couldn't be any more different. Here, the buyer specifically wanted to show a lost masterpiece to the world.
At number 9 in our list is Peter Paul Rubens's Massacre of the Innocents, which sold at auction in 2002 for $76,529,058.
The Flemish painter Peter Paul Rubens is considered one of the greatest artists of all time, so perhaps it's unsurprising that an old master makes it onto my list. Actually, it's rare for such a good quality painting to come to auction. Nearly all the finest old masters are now in museums, and they're highly unlikely to ever reach the market again.
It's hard not to feel a little bit upset when you encounter this picture because there's just no shying away from the subject matter. It tells the story of King Herod's massacre of the newborn boys of Bethlehem, and it's terrifying. You see muscly soldiers ripping babies from their mother's arms and dashing them to the floor. The women themselves are weeping and wailing and scratching, clawing at the faces of their assailants. And these lifeless corpses of the infants, here down at the bottom of the painting, tossed aside like unwanted, forgotten dolls, and they have this distressing shade to their skin, this stone-cold blue. It's just too painful almost to look at, and full of anguish and grief and despair and high-wrought, full-blooded emotion. To be able to do that, to transform something so horrendous and so complex into a coherent piece of beauty is just astounding. And I wondered before coming here whether it's worth paying $76.5 million for any picture at all. But you come here and you see this painting, and it is a total knockout.
The Massacre of the Innocents is even more astonishing when you consider that until recently, it wasn't even thought to have been a Rubens at all. When it was finally identified or attributed to Rubens, the painting's value increased exponentially overnight, adding several noughts to its price. Here at the National Gallery, art historian David Jaffe helped reveal who really painted the Massacre of the Innocents by comparing it with another Rubens masterpiece, Samson and Delilah.
Do you remember when you first saw it?
Yeah, I saw it at Sotheby's, up in their upper sort of so-called private room. It was pretty extraordinary. You know, it was one of those ones where I said, well, we don't have to have a large discussion on this. It's clearly right.
Tell me about the comparisons between Samson and Delilah and the Massacre of the Innocents?
Well, we actually took them upstairs here where we've got decent sunlight and you can look at them very carefully, and they had a lot of the same nuances. Just as you cross a T in a certain way and dot an I in a certain way, painters handle the brush. Particularly when they're bored. Rubens often does a little zigzag. I mean, you see it on the ankle of this painting. You're looking for his handwriting in paint. And if the handwriting works, it's by that artist.
But once the Massacre of the Innocents was attributed to Rubens, what does that do to the value of the painting?
Well, I think everyone wants to buy, you know, the real thing. There are very few great Rubenses of any period in his career now you can buy. So when a great one comes up, it gets an exponential thrust, I guess. Until it's on that moment of being actually for sale, it doesn't have any value. I mean, it's an absolutely arbitrary thing, you know, and you can't predict how idiotic 3 or 4 people will be to try and chase the magic rabbit around the circuit when it comes up.
Only billionaires can chase that rabbit. Ken Thompson was Canada's richest man. He built a global media empire that once encompassed the Times and the Sunday Times. He pumped millions into the Art Gallery of Ontario in his hometown of Toronto to share the glory of art and its creation, as he put it, with the world. The Thompsons are intensely private and seldom give interviews, but Ken's son, David, who bid for the Massacre of the Innocents with his father, has agreed to speak to me.
My father began collecting in the 50s. He'd mutter, and sometimes he'd hit me in the arm and say, "Oh, look at this. Can you imagine someone being able to carve this way? I mean, look at David. Oh, look at the spine." I mean, this is how he responded. And with each object, it would be a different facet to the object. It would be the patination, it would be the color.
One of the defining moments in the history of the collection, of course, came when you bought Rubens' Massacre of the Innocents and paid what still is a world record for an old master painting of just north of $76.5 million.
Weekly, until the auction, he'd come down with the catalog and he'd ask me, "David, what do you think this will fetch? What would you do if you were me?" And I'd say, "Dad, I think, frankly, you need to buy this picture. It's something that resonates like nothing else."
You must have had to fend off some supremely stiff competition. You must have known there was going to be a fight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What was your strategy?
To triumph, to outlast them.
You knew you were going to win.
We knew we were going to win. At least I had a feeling we were going to win.
£45 million. Gonna sell, last chance at...
The final price was £49,500,000, or $76.5 million.
After it was over, there was silence. He took his glasses off, and he took a few deep breaths, and I think he said something to the effect, "Oh my goodness." It's an enormous sum of money, and on a painting, you think to yourself, you know, it's shopping centers, it's tangible, but it was a marker for my father and for his collections.
Ken Thompson died before he could see the Massacre of the Innocents hang as the centrepiece of his collection at the Art Gallery of Ontario, on display for everyone to see forever.
How do you feel when you go to the art gallery now, look at this painting? I imagine if it were me, I'd want to, every time I saw it, just kind of punch the air that I'd got this thing with my dad and given it now to the world. How do you feel?
I just feel a wellspring of emotion because it symbolized a journey for my father. It symbolized a journey between father and son. And it resonated for us as it resonates for so many others. It's a very remarkable touchstone.
So what have I learnt from painting number 9? Well, that overnight, the same painting can be viewed in a completely different way. One day, the Massacre of the Innocents was overlooked. The next, it was suddenly the most expensive old master ever sold. The canvas was exactly the same, but the way it was perceived was magically transformed by its attribution to a superstar artist. To get more of an insight into the